My stepdaughter insulted me at my own celebration, and when I calmly corrected her, my wife said, "She is not your daughter. Do not correct her." I just smiled. Next morning, I canceled her university and car, set up cameras, caught our neighbor in my bed, served a 48-hour eviction, won back every dollar, and walked away with a quiet smile. My name is Ethan Calder, and the night it all started was supposed to be mine. I spent 10 years learning the smell of onions on a hot pan, the rhythm of tickets spitting from a printer, the strange music of a dining room that fills and empties like a tide. That night was the 10th anniversary of my first restaurant. Friends, cousins, aunts, the old line cook who used to call me kid, they filled my house with noise. There was clapping when my brother lifted a beer and said a toast that was mostly bragging disguised as love. I smiled because that is what you do when you are the host. You smile and you refill glasses, and you pretend you do not see the person who will ruin your evening standing right across from you. Her name is Talia. She is my stepdaughter, but we never use that word out loud. My wife, Marisol, always said daughter. She said it with a softening of the face that made the word look heavier than it sounded. Talia had her phone in both hands that night, thumbs moving, eyes down, the exact posture of a person who thinks life should arrive at her table already plated. My brother, who has a talent for asking questions that press on bruises, looked at her and said, "And what are you going to study with the university your father is paying for?" He did not mean it to be cruel. He was proud of me, proud that the restaurants had given me enough to pay for more than my own life. He wanted the room to see it. Talia did not look up. "Something worthwhile," she said. "Law maybe, or medicine. I do not want to end up serving food forever." Silence has a sound. I heard forks stop. I felt my mother freeze in place, the half-smile she reserves for moments she does not know how to hold. I looked at Talia. She was still scrolling with the calm of a person who thinks gravity works only for other people. "That was out of line," I said. My voice surprised me with its steadiness. Marisol moved before I could finish the thought. She put a hand on Talia's shoulder, a small, affectionate landing strip, and looked at me with the expression she uses when she wants me to back down. "She is not your daughter, Ethan. Do not correct her in front of everyone. At least she knows what she wants, unlike you, who got stuck in a kitchen." The words did not hit me like a slap. They settled like dust on a table, and I could suddenly see the outline of everything that had been there all along. The years of small interruptions, the decisions made without me but paid for by me, the way rules dissolved in the air if I was the one speaking them. It all became completely clear and very quiet. "You are right," I said, and I smiled. It startled her. The smile of a man who is finished with pretending looks very close to the smile of a man being polite. People always confuse the two. I woke up the next morning before the sun, not for prep or deliveries, but because I knew if I started moving, I would not stop. I told my manager I would not be in, made coffee I did not drink, opened my laptop, and began to look for the shape of the betrayal I could feel but could not yet name. The bank page loaded slowly. My hands did not shake. I treated it like inventory. Each purchase was an ingredient. Together they would make a dish, and I would finally know what I had been eating. There it was. A recurring charge at a boutique hotel across town. It appeared on Tuesdays and Thursdays like a metronome. Those were the afternoons. Marisol was always out with Talia for mother-daughter errands, doctor visits, shopping for a formal, a spa day earned with good grades, $50 a time, which is exactly what that hotel charges to keep a room on hold with a card until you arrive and pay the rest. I know because I called the hotel once for a team-building event. The memory stepped out of the corner now and raised its hand. More charges. A designer store that I have never set foot in. Perfume I never smelled on her at home. Expensive dinners for two, tucked between the afternoons that were supposedly errands with Talia, and then the transfers, small enough for months to look like household drift. But added together, they made a wall. 2,000 here, 3,000 there. The description line said family shopping or home supplies. I counted 23 transfers in 6 months. A total that would pay for a year of tuition. Evidence is a kind of oxygen. Once you start breathing it, you cannot go back to air that is mostly excuses. I printed statements. I put them in a folder. I opened my phone and bought a small outdoor camera. I told the kid at the counter it was for neighborhood security. He nodded like, every man who buys a camera is protecting something and not trying to see what is hiding in plain sight. I mounted the camera under the eave, aimed at my front door. I watched the live feed on my phone from the office at the restaurant. On the third day, I saw him. Conrad, our next-door neighbor with a handshake that lingered, and a grin that always tested the edges of friendly. The camera watched him stroll to my door 10 minutes after I left. Watched him unlock it with a key I did not know he had. Watched him leave 2 hours later with his shirt untucked. I rewound and confirmed the pattern. If his wife, Nia, left early for her teaching job. Conrad came over after I drove away. If Nia stayed home, the hotel charge appeared. When the charges were large, the transfer to Marisol's private account hit the next day. I did not feel rage. Rage is theatrical. I felt something smaller and more useful. I felt a lever click into place. Now I knew where to put my weight. On Friday, I met a lawyer named Leland, who had the tired eyes of a man who has guided too many people through the end of their illusions. He looked through my folder. He nodded almost imperceptibly. Technically, there is no marriage, he said. No marriage, no marital assets to divide. Which means the house is yours, the car is yours, the accounts are yours. The transfers are a different story. We can sue to recover them. If you have recordings to support misuse of funds, the case is strong. And if they are living in your house without their names on a lease, we can file for eviction. 30 days if they fight, 48 hours if you can justify urgency. I left his office with a list of tasks and a quiet that felt like a cleared road. I went home to dinner and watched Marisol talk about weekend plans as if we all lived on the same planet. Conrad helped me move those boxes you ordered, she said, and she smiled. Such a good neighbor. I nodded and excused myself to the bathroom. There, in the dim light with the fan humming, I opened my bank app and canceled every supplementary card in her name and in Talia's. I disabled online access for both. I stood and looked at myself in the mirror, at a man who had finally understood the difference between being generous and being used. The next afternoon, my phone vibrated while I was tasting sauce on the line. The number was Marisol's. What happened with the cards? She said. Her voice had none of the softness she saves for winning. The tone was pure complaint. We tried to pay for dinner with Talia, but it was declined. Do you know the embarrassment? There are suspicious charges, I said. The bank froze the accounts while they verified. I canceled the cards as a precaution. It could be weeks. I will get you cash for groceries tomorrow. We need more than groceries, Ethan. You are our provider. It was always amazing to me when people used that word like a leash. I told her what I could do. She hung up without a goodbye. That evening, Talia came to the kitchen door in my house and stood with arms crossed. A child who had never learned how not to demand. The car payment bounced, she said. The university portal says my registration is pending. Fix it. Your words last night were clear, I said. I am not your father. If there is a bank investigation, large payments have to wait. Maybe find a part-time job. She stared like I had spoken in a language she refused to learn. Then she went to Marisol, and I heard raised voices. You promised. You promised. It sounded like two people arguing with a mirror. I did not sleep well. Decisions build a scaffolding inside you, and the body needs a night to learn its new balance. In the morning, I installed 2 small cameras inside the house. One in the living room facing the hallway, one in the entry that captured the first steps into the house. I did not hide them out of malice. I hid them because documentation makes liars very quiet when the time comes. On Wednesday, I watched a clip on my phone from the office. Conrad was on my couch, shoes off, phone to his ear. He told Nia that he needed space, that he was not sure he was ready for fatherhood again, that money was tight, and maybe they should slow down. I heard Marisol in my kitchen ask if that was Nia. He said yes. He told Marisol he wanted to be with her, but things were complicated. Marisol said she was saving money on the side just in case and spoke about how I would never suspect. She laughed. He laughed. I locked my phone and stared at the stainless steel counter. Ever since I was a kid, I have honored the rule that if a person is drowning, you do not teach them a lesson about swimming. You throw the rope. Hearing him talk about leaving his pregnant wife, the rope in his hand, made the question simple. Nia deserved the rope. I knocked on her door the next afternoon with a folder in my hand. She is small, with the face of someone who smiles for her students even when she is tired. She looked at my folder and at me like her eyes were trying to measure how much pain to prepare for. I am your neighbor, I said, as if that needed saying. I am sorry to bring this to your door. Please sit. I think you should see these. Her hands trembled when she reached the part of the video where Conrad let himself into my house with a key. Her lips parted in a shocked breath when she heard his voice on the living room camera, telling her on the phone that he was not ready. She did not cry. She stared with the expression of a person adding numbers in her head, double-checking that the answer is what logic says it is. Tomorrow, I told her, they will try again. He comes 10 minutes after I leave. If you feel strong enough, we can walk in together. There will be no doubt after that. She closed her eyes. When she opened them, they had that clear focus people get when they move from pain to plan. I will come, she said. Thank you for telling me. At dawn, I left the house with my chef coat over my arm. I kissed Marisol on the cheek, and she smiled back like she was still winning. I drove to my lawyer, picked up the eviction order, and then parked at the small park around the corner. Nia arrived in a gray sweater and stood like a person about to enter a courtroom. We walked the block together without speaking. I opened my door as quietly as I could. We stepped into the living room and heard what we came to hear. The sounds from the end of the hall were ugly and human, and they ripped through the last of my denial. We walked down the hall. When I opened the bedroom door, Conrad looked like a boy caught stealing from a candy jar. Marisol went cold as salt. She gathered the sheet to her chest and said something that sounded like, "Wait," and like, "Please," and like a story that had worked on me once and would not again. Nia did not scream. She walked to the dresser and picked up Conrad's shirt like it was a piece of evidence. She said, "I am pregnant, and you are going to send every check on time for the next 18 years. And then she left. Conrad stumbled after her, trying to pull his pants on, mumbling her name. The front door closed with a clean clap. Sometimes the world ends with a bang. Sometimes it ends with paperwork. I placed the eviction notice on the bed, and the paper looked heavier than it should have looked. "You have 48 hours, I said. "You cannot," Marisol said. She looked at the paper like it was a trick. "This is my house too." "No," I said. "This is my house. The transfer records are in my lawyer's office. The camera recordings are backed up. I will be suing you to recover the money you moved. You plan to run with it. I have your voice saying so." She reached for my hand. Then, for the script, she thinks, survives every crisis. I was going to pay it back. "We can fix this. This was a mistake. I love you." "You love convenience," I said. "You love what my name does in a bank. You love that I do not ask questions. But I learned to ask." Talia appeared in the doorway and looked from me to the eviction order. Her voice was high and thin. "We are your family. You cannot do this. You told a room full of people you did not want my life," I said. "Consider this a gift. You get to build your own." The 48 hours passed, and they left. They did not smash plates or carve insults in the wall. They took what was theirs and some things that were not. Small things that do not matter to anyone but the person who bought them. I changed the locks and slept in the guest room for a week because the bed upstairs felt like a courtroom where the verdict had already been delivered. Nia moved into her sister's house across town. She filed for divorce. Conrad tried to apologize to me outside once. He waited by my car like a man hoping for a miracle. I told him I was busy and that my lawyer would contact him if we needed anything further. He looked smaller then, like a person who had finally met the bill for his choices. I sold the house. I could not keep walking past the doorway where Conrad had used my key. I bought a clean apartment with light that falls across the floor in the afternoon like a soft blanket. There is a small balcony with a view of a park. On Saturdays, I sit with a cup of coffee and listen to the world pass. Children with scooters, couples with 2 small dogs, and not enough patience. The sound of a basketball hitting a rim and failing, then trying again. Talia sent a message from a number I did not know. She said she was sorry. She said she understood now. She said she needed help with university, that she would pay me back. The words looked very neat on the screen, and I realized neatness had been our problem all along. Marisol made our life look tidy while moving pieces when I was not watching. I did not reply. I closed the thread and placed the phone face down. Some nights I think about forgiveness the way a cook thinks about salt. You can add it at the end, but if it never touched the pan while the food cooked, something is missing. If Marisol had ever said the words "I am sorry" and meant them, if she had looked at me and not at what I could still provide, perhaps I would have made a different choice. She never did. Talia never did. They asked for relief, not forgiveness. Those are different currencies. 2 months after the eviction, the civil suit was settled. The money came back with interest and legal fees. The total looked like a number someone else would earn. I put it in a separate account with a name that made me laugh. Dignity Fund. Leland shook my hand and told me to buy myself something unnecessary. I nodded and went home and made the perfect omelet in silence. The unnecessary purchase I wanted was a quiet kitchen. The restaurants are doing well. I arrive early and leave when the dining room softens. I stand at the pass and hear the language that made me. The short commands. The yes chef. The plates sliding forward like solved problems. I hired a young manager named Priya who has the sharpness of a person who survives by telling herself no and the kindness to tell others yes at the right moment. On slow afternoons, we sit with spreadsheets, and I show her how to read profit like a story. She shows me how to keep the staff calendar without a dozen sticky notes. We are building something calm. People sometimes ask me if I miss them. I do not miss the person I had to be to keep that house together. I do not miss the way my own rules in my own home dissolved when someone rolled their eyes. I do not miss the feeling of being a wallet with a man attached. Do I miss the girl Talia could have been? Maybe. But that version of her never had a chance to grow in a house that taught her you never have to say thank you if you are the one doing the asking. One evening, late, the phone rang. It was a number I recognized. Marisol's voice came through the speaker like a photograph of itself. The light was wrong. I made a mistake, she said. I thought love was something you could measure in comfort. I was wrong. Can we talk? We are talking, I said. In person. There is nothing left that requires a door, I said. I wish you peace. I wish you the strength to be a mother who does not ask her child to help her lie. That is all I have. I hung up and stood in the dark kitchen with my hand on the cool stone of the counter. Outside on the balcony, the city breathed its warm summer breath. I took a plate from the cabinet and set it on the counter like I was preparing for company, and then laughed at myself. I put it back. I poured a glass of water and drank it slowly until the glass was empty. If you ask me what I learned, I would say this. Love without boundaries is not love. It is a drain. Respect is not a speech you demand from other people. Respect is a budget. You assign it to yourself. You protect it with locks. You defend it with paper and patience and, when needed, a sheriff at the door. I learned that generosity is a contract between your heart and your judgment. If you sign it without reading, someone will always add a clause. Sometimes I walk past the hotel where the small charges appeared like breadcrumbs. The awning looks harmless. People walk in and out with luggage, with secrets, with relief. I do not feel anger. I feel something cleaner. I feel gratitude that the world is large and that it still contains mornings when I open a kitchen door and the smell of stock greets me like an old friend. I feel relieved that there are still afternoons when I can sit on a balcony and hear kids laugh in a language that does not need me to save face. I feel proud that when I hear the word provider now, I think of what I provide to myself first. Peace. A bed I chose. A future that answers to my name. On Sundays, I visit my mother. She asks about the restaurants and pretends not to judge my choices. She places her hand on mine sometimes and says, "Your house is quieter." She means your life looks smaller. I smile and change the subject to the lemon tree in her yard. I tell her we will make marmalade in the winter like we used to. We will stand at her stove and fill the kitchen with sugar and citrus and the sound of jars sealing with small pops. We will send those jars to people we love. We will not send them to people who believe that my worth was theirs to spend. Boundaries can be delicious. A year later, the restaurants threw a party for me. The staff surprised me with a cake that tasted like the first one I ever bought for the line after a crazy Friday. Priya made a speech. She said I taught her more about patience than money. She said I showed her that a good life is built like a good service. Prep early, do not waste, keep your knives sharp, clean as you go, and never let someone who does not respect the kitchen stand at the pass. Everyone laughed. I did too. It felt light. It felt like air that had never carried the smell of lies. When I walked home that night, I stopped at the park and watched a kid practice free throws alone under a streetlight. He missed, and then he made one, and he did not cheer. He just nodded slightly and stood a little taller and lined up for another. I wanted to tell him that was it. That right there, the small private nod when you get your own life right by inches, that is the good part. But he did not need me to say it. He already knew. I went upstairs to my apartment, opened the balcony door, and let the night in. I sat in the chair by the rail and looked at the street and thought about the boy, about the chef coat folded on the chair by my bed, about the eviction order that started a better life. I thought about Nia and her child and hoped they were safe. I thought about Talia and hoped she had found a class that taught her how to speak with care. I thought about Marisol and hoped she learned to love something that could not be bought. I finished my water, set the glass on the sill, and turned off the light. The room held the kind of quiet that belongs to you when no one else is claiming it. I lay down and closed my eyes and slept. Not like a man escaping, not like a man recovering, but like a man whose home finally fits him.